The flickering overhead light cast harsh shadows across the concrete floor as 24-year-old Kimberly Nelson stood in the center of the abandoned Barcelona warehouse, surrounded by armed men in expensive suits whose cold eyes assessed her like merchandise. The air smelled of oil and rust, and somewhere in the darkness she could hear water dripping steadily, marking time she didn't have. Each man stood statue still, their hands resting near concealed weapons, all waiting for the order from the Spanish Mafia Boss who controlled the city's entire criminal underworld. "Your father owes me $500,000. Alejandro Pérez's accented voice cut through the silence from the shadows, smooth as expensive whiskey and twice as dangerous. Money he gambled away in my establishments. Money he promised to repay in 3 months. That was 6 months ago." The men shifted slightly, creating a path. Kimberly's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she clutched her phone, the one that had received the message 3 days ago, with photos of her 16-year-old brother Jamal leaving school, her mother exiting the hospital where she worked. The message that had brought her across an ocean to this moment. Then he stepped into the light. Alejandro Pérez didn't look like a monster at first glance, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, all sharp edges and dark promises. Dark hair slicked back perfectly, tattoos crawling up his neck and decorating his hands like violent art, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow that spoke of survival. His tailored black suit probably cost more than her entire year's tuition, but his eyes told a different story. They were black as the Mediterranean at midnight, and when they landed on her, Kimberly understood what it meant to be prey. "Miss Nelson," he said, her name rolling off his tongue with deliberate precision. "Your father is a coward. He borrowed my money, lost it at poker tables from here to Monaco, and then disappeared. Left you to clean up his mess." He moved closer, each step measured, predatory. "So now I'm offering you a choice." The warehouse felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. Kimberly's psychology degree hadn't prepared her for this. Nothing had prepared her for this. "You can pay the $500,000 in 48 hours, Alejandro continued, stopping mere feet from her. This close, she could see the ink disappearing beneath his collar, could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her head spin. Or, his dark eyes traveled over her face, studying her with an intensity that made her skin burn. "You become collateral." "Collateral?" The word came out barely above a whisper. "You belong to me for 1 year. You live under my roof. You follow my rules. You are mine to do with as I please." His voice dropped lower, more intimate, more terrifying. "At the end of 12 months, if you fulfilled the terms, the debt is cleared. Your family walks away alive." Kimberly's heart hammered against her ribs. "And if I refuse both options?" Alejandro pulled out his phone, swiped the screen, and held it up. Security footage of her mother's apartment building, of Jamal's school, of every place her family felt safe. "Then I take payment another way. Your mother, your brother, everyone Kennedy Nelson loves pays for what he owes. 3 bullets, 3 graves, 1 choice." The armed men remained motionless, but Kimberly could feel their attention, their judgment. She thought of Jamal's laugh, her mother's tired smile after double shifts. She thought of her father, wherever he was hiding, whatever hole he'd crawled into to save himself while offering up his daughter instead. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "How do I know you won't kill them anyway?" Something flickered in Alejandro's eyes, respect, maybe, or surprise. "Because I am many things, Miss Nelson, but I keep my promises, always. Ask anyone in this city. When Alejandro Pérez gives his word, it's blood." The dripping water echoed, the moment stretched. Kimberly looked at the exit 50 feet away, armed men between her and freedom, a foreign city outside where she knew no one, had nothing. She looked at Alejandro's face, beautiful and brutal, patient and predatory. She thought of her mother. She thought of Jamal. She thought of the life she was supposed to have, graduation in 1 semester, maybe grad school, maybe a normal future with normal problems. "If I agree." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "If I become your collateral, you swear my family stays safe?" "For the whole year. I swear it. And after the year I'm free? The debt is gone?" "Completely." It wasn't really a choice. It never had been. "Then yes." The word tasted like ash. "I agree." Alejandro's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Satisfaction, possession, something darker she couldn't name. Wise decision. He gestured to one of his men, who stepped forward with a folder. Diego will explain the rules. You'll sign the contract. And then Alejandro moved even closer, until she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Then you come home with me, Kimberly, because as of this moment, you're mine. Hey everyone, please tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support makes all the difference for us to keep creating these emotional stories. 6 days earlier, Kimberly Nelson had been sitting in her cramped Chicago apartment, surrounded by psychology textbooks and half-empty coffee cups, when her phone rang with an international number. She'd almost ignored it, probably a scam, probably nothing, but something made her answer. The voice on the other end spoke in accented English, calm and professional. "Miss Nelson, my name is Diego Ruiz. I work for someone your father owes a significant debt to. He's disappeared, and now that debt falls to his family. You have 72 hours to come to Barcelona and discuss terms, or we begin collecting payment in other ways. I've sent you photos so you understand we're serious." Her phone had buzzed. Images appeared. Jamal leaving school, laughing with friends, completely unaware someone was watching. Her mother walking to her car after her hospital shift, exhausted and vulnerable. Their apartment building, their routines, their lives, catalogued and threatened. "Who is this?" Kimberly had demanded, her hands shaking. "What debt? My father doesn't." "Your father borrowed $500,000 from my employer 6 months ago. He promised repayment in 3 months. He gambled it all away and fled to Morocco 2 days later. Now the debt is yours to settle." A pause. "Unless you prefer we settle it ourselves. I'm a college student. I don't have that kind of—" "Come to Barcelona, Miss Nelson. My employer prefers to discuss terms in person. Don't make him come to you." The line had gone dead. 3 days later, she'd maxed out her credit card for a plane ticket, lied to her mother about a study abroad opportunity, and boarded a flight to Spain with nothing but a carry-on bag and growing dread. She'd researched her father's debts during the flight, found nothing but rumors about his gambling addiction getting worse, about him borrowing from dangerous people, about him vanishing without a word. He'd abandoned them. Again. And now Kimberly was standing in a warehouse on the outskirts of Barcelona, watching the most dangerous man she'd ever met study her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. "Welcome to Spain," Alejandro said softly, his voice carrying a promise that sounded more like a threat. "I hope you didn't pack much. Where you're going, you won't need your old clothes." The warehouse door slammed shut behind her with the finality of a prison cell locking, and Kimberly Nelson's old life, the one with dreams of graduate school and normal problems and freedom, disappeared into the Barcelona night, replaced by something far more dangerous. She just didn't know yet that the man who'd bought her would become obsessed with keeping her, or that she'd eventually choose to stay. The taxi had dropped Kimberly at the warehouse district, just as the sun disappeared behind Barcelona's skyline, painting the industrial buildings in shades of rust and shadow. Her hands trembled as she approached the address from the text message, the smell of oil and seawater thick in the evening air. "Your father took our money," the voice on the phone had said 3 days ago. "Now we'll take something of his." Inside, the warehouse stretched vast and empty except for 6 men in dark suits, positioned around the perimeter like sentries. Their hands rested near their waistbands near guns, Kimberly realized, with ice flooding her veins. The single overhead light created a pool of illumination in the center, and that's where they directed her to stand. She waited, alone, watched. Then footsteps echoed from the darkness, measured and deliberate. The armed men straightened imperceptibly. Alejandro Pérez emerged from the shadows, like something conjured from nightmares. 30 years old, maybe, with dark hair slicked back to reveal a face that belonged on magazine covers, if magazines featured men who clearly knew 100 ways to kill you. Tattoos decorated his throat, disappearing beneath his black dress shirt. More ink covered his hands, intricate patterns that spoke of violence and survival. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, and his dark eyes assessed her with the cold calculation of a predator sizing up prey. "Miss Nelson," his accent wrapped around her name. "Your father, Kennedy, is a gambling addict and a coward. He borrowed $500,000 from me 6 months ago, promised repayment in 3 months. Alejandro circled her slowly. He lost it all at poker tables across Europe, then fled to Morocco 2 days later. I didn't know. They call me El Cazador. The hunter. He stopped in front of her. No one who owes me ever escapes. Everyone pays. Your father understood this, which is why he sent you instead. He didn't send me. I came because you threatened my family. Smart girl. Alejandro pulled out his phone, showed her photos, her mother leaving the hospital, Jamal at his locker, both unaware they were being watched. Here's your choice. Pay $500,000 in 48 hours, or become mine for 1 year. Live under my roof. Follow my rules. Belong to me. At the end, the debt is cleared. What does belong to you mean? His smile didn't reach his eyes. It means you're mine to do with as I please. It means you don't leave. It means you are collateral human insurance that debts get paid. Kimberly's throat constricted. And if I refuse? He gestured to the photos. Choose quickly, Miss Nelson. Your mother's shift ends in 2 hours. The warehouse seemed to tilt. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution notice with one escape clause. Do we have an agreement, Miss Nelson? Kimberly thought of Jamal's laugh, her mother's exhausted smile, her father's cowardice. Yes. Alejandro's expression shifted satisfaction mixed with something darker, something possessive that made her skin prickle. Then welcome to your new life, cariño. Let's go home. The Mercedes climbed into the Barcelona hills, the city lights spreading below like fallen stars. Kimberly sat rigid in the back seat, Alejandro beside her, his presence suffocating in the confined space. Neither spoke. The estate appeared behind iron gates 12 feet tall, topped with cameras. Guards waved them through. More cameras tracked their progress up the circular drive. The mansion loomed ahead, all stone and glass and Mediterranean elegance, but Kimberly saw it for what it was. A beautiful prison. Welcome home, Alejandro said softly. An elderly woman met them at the entrance, her grey hair pulled back severely. Rosa will show you to your room, Alejandro explained. She speaks little English, but she'll take care of you. Rosa's eyes held quiet sympathy as she led Kimberly upstairs. The bedroom was luxurious, king bed with silk sheets, marble bathroom, sitting area but bars covered the windows. Decorative, expensive bars, but bars nonetheless. Kimberly tested the door after Rosa left. It locked from the outside. A man appeared in the doorway before she could process this, lean, sharp-featured, hostile. I'm Diego, Alejandro's second in command. The rules. No leaving the grounds, no unauthorized phone calls, no visitors. You check in with Alejandro daily. Break the rules, your family pays. That first night, Kimberly pressed her face into the pillow and sobbed until her throat was raw. She checked the door 3 times, hoping she'd imagined the lock. She hadn't. Morning brought a summons. Alejandro waited in a sun-drenched dining room, impeccably dressed, drinking espresso. A leather folder sat on the table. The contract, he said, sliding it toward her. 1 year. Terms clearly specified. Penalties for breach, clearly defined. Kimberly read through trembling hands. In the event of escape or non-compliance, associated parties will be held accountable. Terminal accountability. Sign it. In pen? With this. Alejandro reached into his jacket. He didn't produce a pen. Instead, he slid a heavy, open ink pad across the marble table. The ink inside was thick, viscous, and the color of deep, arterial red. In my world, signatures can be forged, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. But a print is the soul. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was iron, yet his touch was surprisingly gentle. He pressed her thumb into the crimson ink, holding it there for a heartbeat. Kimberly shivered. The cool, wet sensation felt disturbingly like fresh blood coating her skin. Press it here, he commanded, guiding her hand to the bottom of the page. She pressed down. When she lifted her thumb, the red swirl stood out against the stark white paper, like an open wound. It looked obscene, permanent. You'll come to understand I always keep my word, Alejandro said, his dark eyes holding hers as he wiped the red ink from her thumb with a white handkerchief. I expect the same. I'll never stop hating you for this. His smile was cold. I don't need your love, Miss Nelson. Only your obedience. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Settle in. You're going to be here a long time. The door closed behind him with soft finality. Kimberly stared at her blood drying on the contract and wondered if her father had any idea what he'd condemned her to, or if he'd even cared enough to wonder. The first 2 weeks, Kimberly mapped every inch of the compound like a prisoner planning escape. The garden had cameras, the garage had guards, the perimeter wall had sensors. Every exit was monitored, every window barred. There was no way out that didn't end with a bullet. She discovered the cameras on day 3, tiny lenses, embedded in crown molding, in artwork frames, in the garden statuary. He was watching, always watching. Her routine became mechanical. Meals delivered by Rosa, limited internet access on a monitored tablet, books from the library to pass endless hours. The isolation pressed against her chest like a physical weight. On day 5, Alejandro allowed her a phone call. 15 minutes. Supervised. Her mother's voice cracked with relief. "Baby, are you okay? This study abroad program so sudden." "I'm fine, Mom. The debt's handled." Dad's debt. Kimberly forced brightness into her tone while Diego watched from the corner. "Everything's fine now." Jamal grabbed the phone. "Kim, Spain sounds so cool. Send pictures." She ended the call before she broke, but worse than the isolation was the constant awareness of him. Alejandro appeared everywhere, in doorways when she turned corners, in the garden when she walked the paths, shadows shifting to reveal his presence. Not threatening, just there, watching. On day 12, she was reading in the library when he entered without knocking. "Interesting choice," he said, gesturing to her book. She'd been reading her psychology textbook, the chapter on Stockholm Syndrome. She didn't bother hiding it. Seemed relevant. "May I?" He sat without waiting for permission, his movements elegant and predatory. "I read Jung's work on psychological captivity once. Fascinating how the mind adapts to survive." They talked for an hour. Philosophy, power dynamics, Nietzsche's will to power. He quoted Foucault from memory, debated Kant's categorical imperative. His intelligence was razor-sharp, his education extensive. He wasn't supposed to be this. Wasn't supposed to be anything but a monster. Later, Diego cornered her in the hallway. "He watches the camera feeds of your room, studies you, like a puzzle." His expression was venomous. "He's obsessed with you already. That makes you dangerous to all of us." On day 14, her birthday, though she'd told no one, Rosa delivered a package to her room. Inside, professional art supplies, sketch pads, and a stack of English novels. Her favorite authors. Books she'd mentioned wanting to read in social media posts from years ago. Her hands shook as she opened the card. "Happy birthday, Kimberly. 2A." He knocked minutes later, leaning against her doorframe with unnerving casualness. "How did you know it was my birthday?" Alejandro's smile was soft and terrifying. "I know everything about you, Kimberly. Your favorite color, your coffee order, the scar on your left knee from falling off your bike at age 7. He pushed off the frame. Everything. The door closed. Kimberly stared at the gifts and realized his interest wasn't casual observation. It was obsession. Month 2 brought Carmen, Alejandro's younger sister, 26, and warm where her brother was cold. She arrived with Spanish textbooks and genuine kindness. "Hola, Kimberly. Vamos a aprender," she said, smiling. "Let's learn." Over coffee in the garden, Carmen studied her thoughtfully. "My brother has never brought a woman to live here. Whatever he tells you this arrangement is, it's not just business." Before Kimberly could respond, another woman appeared, elegant, severe, dripping with diamonds. Isabella Pérez assessed Kimberly like spoiled produce. "This American girl is not suitable," she said in perfect English, speaking to Alejandro as if Kimberly were invisible. "You need a proper Spanish wife. Someone from a good family." "Kimberly stays." Alejandro's voice cut like a blade. "That's not negotiable, Mama." Isabella left in a cloud of expensive perfume and disapproval. That afternoon, Kimberly witnessed what Alejandro really was. A debtor was brought to his office, a man who'd skimmed money from shipments. She watched from the hallway as Alejandro's men held him down, as Alejandro's strikes were brutal and precise, ignoring the man's desperate pleas for mercy. She confronted him afterward, her whole body shaking. "You're a monster." He wiped blood from his knuckles without remorse. "Yes, you knew that when you agreed to this." That night, she couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., she found herself wandering the dark hallways, drawn to the light seeping under his study door. Alejandro sat behind his desk, whiskey in hand, staring at computer screens. Surveillance footage of her, reading in the library, walking the garden, sleeping. "Can't rest either?" he asked without turning. "Why do you do this?" The violence. She gestured helplessly. All of it. My father was murdered when I was 15. Rivals shot my mother 3 times, she survived. Barely. I rebuilt our empire from blood and ashes because the alternative was extinction. He finally looked at her. I do what's necessary. To her horror, tears slipped down her cheeks. Alejandro stood, crossed to her, and offered his handkerchief without mockery. The gentleness surprised them both. That's when she noticed his hand, the cut from the beating, still bleeding. Without thinking, she took his hand, examining the wound. This needs cleaning. The air shifted. They were too close. His eyes too dark. Her pulse too fast. Alejandro pulled her close, his tattooed hand cupping her face. When he kissed her, she didn't resist. For 30 seconds, she surrendered completely, until reality crashed back like ice water. She jerked away, horrified at herself, and ran. Behind her, Alejandro touched his lips, tasted her shock and surrender. "Mierda," he whispered to the empty room. "This is becoming a problem." Month 4 brought sirens screaming up the hillside at dawn. "Policía! Abran la puerta!" The battering ram hit the gate as Kimberly stumbled from her room. Chaos erupted, armed guards shouting, Alejandro's men scrambling, the compound transforming into a war zone. Diego appeared in the hallway, face twisted with something like satisfaction. Too satisfied. Alejandro materialized beside her, fury and calculation warring in his expression. "The ledgers. They're looking for the ledgers." He thrust a leather portfolio at her. "Hide these. Now." She could have dropped them. Could have let the police find them. End this nightmare. Be free. But freedom meant Alejandro in prison, meant her contract void, her family unprotected, her father's debt unpaid and collected in blood. Kimberly ran to her room, shoved the portfolio under her mattress, then beneath floorboards she'd discovered during her initial mapping. She was smoothing the rug when police burst through her door. "You speak English?" The officer's accent was thick. She played confused American perfectly. "What's happening?" "I'm just staying here. I don't know anything about his business." They tore her room apart. Found nothing. An hour later, they left empty-handed, frustrated and suspicious. Alejandro found her in the garden, still shaking. "Why did you do that?" "Because you keep your word. If you go to prison, my family dies. I need you free to keep your promise." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, respect, something darker. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you." The shift was immediate. That evening, he granted her supervised trips to Barcelona, museums, cafes, glimpses of normal life, better internet access, video calls with her family. The cage expanded, but she realized with growing unease that it was still a cage, just prettier. What she didn't know, the guard who'd stared at her too long during her garden walks was found floating in the harbor 3 days later. What she did know, Diego cornered Alejandro in his office, voice venomous. "You're making her comfortable. She's making you weak. If anything happens to her," Alejandro said softly, dangerously, "I'll know who's responsible, and I'll make your death last weeks." Days later, Alejandro summoned her to his study. "There's a charity gala next week, Barcelona's elite. You'll attend with me." "As what?" His smile was possessive. "As mine." Her stomach dropped. "Alejandro, you'll be presented as mine, cariño. Not as collateral, as mine. The world will see you at my side." He moved closer. "Time to show Barcelona who you belong to." The prison was expanding again. But this time, the bars were made of silk and diamonds and public claim, and Kimberly wasn't sure if that made it better or infinitely worse. The stylist transformed Kimberly into someone she barely recognized. The emerald silk gown hugged every curve, the neckline daring. "But the diamonds, Isabella's diamonds," Carmen whispered with wide eyes. "Those made the statement. His mother's jewelry. A claim of ownership disguised as honor." Alejandro's reaction when she descended the stairs made her breath catch. He went completely still, dark eyes tracking every movement. "You're stunning." In the Mercedes, his hand rested on her thigh, proprietary and warm. "Stay close to me tonight. There are people who would hurt you to hurt me." The gala was Barcelona's criminal elite, pretending to be philanthropists. Crystal chandeliers, champagne, designer gowns hiding designer violence. Alejandro introduced her as his no explanation, no qualifier, just Kimberly. "She's mine." The looks came immediately. Judgment from the women, curiosity from the men, desire from some which made Alejandro's grip on her waist tighten dangerously. The Mendez family approached rivals, Carmen had warned. Carlos Mendez smiled like a shark. Perez, I heard you'd taken a companion. Careful, Carlos. Alejandro's voice dropped to ice. Kimberly used every psychology skill she had, navigating condescension with grace, reading power dynamics, impressing Alejandro's allies with her composure. She watched him watch her, pride flickering in his expression. Then he pulled her onto the dance floor. Bodies close, his hand on her lower back, her pulse racing. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. I don't mean the people here. I mean us. His eyes darkened. I know that too. The gunfire shattered the moment. Glass exploded. Screams erupted. Kimberly saw the gun aimed at Alejandro's chest and moved without thinking, throwing herself in front of him as the bullet tore through her shoulder. Pain exploded white-hot. Alejandro caught her as she fell, his face transformed by naked terror. His men returned fire. Chaos. Blood. Her blood soaking the emerald silk. He carried her through the carnage, pressing his hand against her wound. In the car, speeding toward the hospital, she saw something she'd never seen before. Fear, raw and devastating. Why did you do that? He demanded, his voice breaking. I don't know. But they both knew. At the hospital, Alejandro's words echoed through the corridors as doctors rushed her to surgery. If she dies, I'll burn Barcelona to the ground. Alejandro never left her bedside. 3 days, he stayed sleeping in the chair, refusing to handle business, his hand always near hers. Kimberly drifted in and out of consciousness, pain medication blurring reality. On the third night, she woke to his voice, low and broken. You were supposed to be collateral. Just a transaction. A year of obedience for your father's debt. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But you've become the only thing I can't afford to lose. If you die because of me. She opened her eyes, their gazes locked. He knew she'd heard. Why do you care if I live or die? Her voice was hoarse. The debt could be restructured. The debt is irrelevant now. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truth. You're no longer collateral, Kimberly. You're mine, because I want you, not because of what your father owed. This is Stockholm Syndrome, she whispered. I can't trust these feelings. You trapped me. I can't. Maybe it is. His brutal honesty cut through her defenses. Or maybe you see what no one else has, that I'm not just a monster, that there's something in me worth something. The shift came when she was discharged. He moved her to his wing, the master suite adjacent to his own. No locked doors, no bars. He trusted her not to run. Where would she go? Her heart was betraying her. Month 6 arrived quietly. Halfway through the contract, Carmen found her in the garden, concern etched on her face. My brother has never loved anyone except family. If he loves you, he'll never let you go even after the year is up. Carmen gripped her hand. You need to decide if you can live with that. Diego's warning to Alejandro was less gentle. She's your weakness now. The Mendez family knows it. This will destroy everything your father built. Then let it burn. A week later, Diego burst into Alejandro's study during dinner, his expression grim. We have a problem. Kimberly Nelson was spotted in Madrid. Security footage from 3 different locations. He threw photos on the table. He's coming back. Kimberly's fork clattered to her plate. Alejandro's expression went cold as winter. Is he now? Her father. Coming back. After 6 months of silence, of abandonment, of leaving her to this fate. Coming back for what? To check on her? Or to negotiate again? Month 7. Kimberly Nelson arrived at the compound gates in a rented sedan, demanding an audience with Alejandro Pérez. They met in Alejandro's office. Kimberly stood in the adjacent hallway, hidden but listening, as her father's voice drifted through the cracked door. I want to renegotiate our arrangement. Kennedy sounded confident, entitled. She's my daughter, my property to do with as I please. You're just erasing debt, not even paying me. A private buyer in Madrid will give me $750,000 for her. Cash. Kimberly's blood turned to ice. Alejandro's voice dropped to something subterranean. You want to sell your daughter? Again. Our arrangement was 1 year. I'm offering you a buyout. The sound of furniture overturning. Alejandro's men restraining him. His rage was volcanic, barely contained. I've known where you were for 6 months, Alejandro snarled. Morocco, then Tunisia, then Madrid. I let you live because killing you would hurt her. But you come here, to my home, and try to take what's mine. Kimberly pushed through the door. Both men turned. Kimberly, baby, Kennedy started. Don't. Her voice shook with fury. You sold me to pay your debts. You abandoned me. You left me to face this alone. And now you want to sell me again? To the Russians? Like I'm livestock? You're my daughter. No, I was your daughter. You gambled that away along with everything else. Alejandro's expression was deadly calm. He's your father. You decide. I'll kill him, let him go, or give you back to him. Your choice. The room held its breath. Kimberly looked at her father, weak, selfish, seeing her only as currency. Then at Alejandro, dangerous, possessive, but who'd kept every promise. I'm not going with him. She turned to Alejandro. But I'm not your collateral anymore either. If I stay as your equal, as your partner, as someone who chooses to be here. Not because I'm forced. Can you give me that? Silence stretched. Yes. Kennedy was escorted out with a warning. Contact her family again, and he dies. Diego witnessed everything, his expression incredulous. You just made her your equal. The men will never respect. Then they can leave. She stays, on her terms. Later, alone in the garden, Kimberly found Alejandro staring at the Barcelona lights. So what are we now? She asked softly. He turned, pulling her close. Whatever you want us to be. Months 8 through 12 transformed everything. Alejandro taught her the business money laundering through legitimate fronts, territory management, ally relationships, the delicate balance of power that kept Barcelona stable. Kimberly proved herself sharp and strategic, bringing psychological insights to negotiations that even hardened criminals hadn't anticipated. She reads people, one of Alejandro's captains admitted, knows what they want before they say it. Even Diego grudgingly acknowledged her value after she diffused a territorial dispute that would have cost them millions. You were right about her, he told Alejandro. She's an asset. Public perception shifted. No longer the American collateral, now she was Senora Pérez, his partner. Whispers followed them through Barcelona. She'd taken a bullet for him, chosen him over her own father, earned her place through blood and loyalty. Their relationship deepened beyond physical attraction, though that intensified too, no longer fighting the pull between them. But it was the intellectual match that surprised them both. Late nights in his study, debating strategy, building something together, her innovation, a charitable arm of the organization, genuine community work that also laundered money brilliantly. Alejandro watched her present the plan with undisguised pride. Month 12 arrived on a quiet Tuesday. In his study, Kimberly held the blood-signed contract. The end date stared back at her. She could walk away, free, the debt erased. Instead, she tore it in half. This paper doesn't own me, she said, meeting Alejandro's eyes. I choose you. He crossed to her, cupped her face with tattooed hands. I will never trap you again. Every day you stay is a day you choose me. I swear it. Then he knelt, properly, a velvet box in his hands. Not as transaction, not as collateral, as my partner, my equal, my choice. His voice roughened. Marry me, Kimberly, for real this time. Yes. The wedding was small, intimate. His family calm and beaming, Isabella surprisingly warm, her mother and Jamal finally understanding, finally safe. Isabella pulled Alejandro aside. You were right, my son. She is stronger than any of us knew. As they danced at the reception, Kimberly caught Alejandro's expression, wonder mixed with possession, love mixed with obsession. What are you thinking? She asked. That I bought you for a debt and gained a kingdom. She smiled against his chest. I was sold for 500,000 and became priceless. And that is the story of how Kimberly went from collateral to queen. Now, I have a question for you about this ending. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you despise her father, Kennedy? Honestly, him trying to sell her twice might make him the biggest villain in this whole story. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Also, if you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story, even crazier than this. And as always, I love seeing how global our community is, so let me know where you are watching from today. See you in the next story.